Honorable Mr. Justice Swatantra Kumarji, who has been virtually a pathbreaker in the field of environmental governance, is heading the NGT, the National Green Tribunal, for a very critical period, as well as having been a judge of the Supreme Court and the High Court. My distinguished colleagues and friends who have signed this declaration and have attended this event for the last 3 days, distinguished delegates and friends. The essence of the 3 meets, the Renewable Energy Meet, the Water Summit, and the ISA Sun Summit, have been crystallized in this declaration, which has just been read out to you by Mr. Pradeep Chaturvedi. The concern over climate change, over fossil fuel overuse and emissions, almost the entire dependence of economic activity, human transportation, and living on fossil fuels is gradually coming to, I would say, a new paradigm, which is characterized by what we call energy transitions. At the same time, the planet is visiting a graver emergency, and that is the emergency of water availability, which is shrinking across developing countries particularly, and the per capita availability of water is reaching alarming proportions, as I had occasion to discuss with you in the opening of the event. What is of great concern is, I think, growing urbanization, mindless urbanization, as I pointed out. At one time, civilizations were looking at water, availability of other resources, salubrious climate for setting up habitations. Today, economic greed has forced us to just look for land and locate habitations. As I use the word that you build, sell, and scoot, leaving a total urban mess thereafter. The first, you see, emergency that is of global emissions, global warming, again, is an emergency that is not being uniformly understood across the globe. And there was a time when developing countries like India were being forced to reduce their energy emissions. And I remember, as a Joint Secretary to the Government of India, as Additional Secretary and also as Secretary, I would be attending international events where we would be asked, why doesn't India sign these conventions? Kyoto Protocol was a leading convention. We were, of course, a developing country with our differentiated responsibility. But today, the leading economies who were forcing us to sign those declarations and commitments and switch are themselves backing out of these accords, the last being the Paris Accord. In fact, there were many doubts initially raised about the predictions of global warming. The IPCC was set up, which came to some conclusions, but they were being accepted with a fair degree of reluctance and criticism. But I think successive studies have shown that yes, climate change is becoming a reality, and we are moving towards more insecure and more violent climate. as we've recently witnessed in India. Pounding of rain suddenly, hurricanes, storms, drought, all these are visiting us today. And yet there are people who mindlessly pursue their objectives of economic growth and economic imperialism, whether on a macro scale globally, or a micro scale, or a mini micro scale at various levels. In fact, there was a very interesting item which some of you may have read today in newspapers, and the debate about climate change particularly, and about the need to conserve certain resources, water, preserve the environment, is something akin to a debate which I might mention to you before the minister comes, is about the economic growth and situation in India. There are various estimates of it. Some say it's alarming, some say it's all rosy, some say it's just cyclical, others say it is structural or endemic, and something needs to be done drastically. Today again there is a dispute between the head of the Niti Aayog and the chief economic advisor on differing versions of it. And a hilarious, I should say, an interlude happened. An agency no other than the Reserve Bank of India, in its meeting of the Monetary Policy Committee, a member of the Monetary Policy Committee, Mr. Chetan Ghate, said, "The estimates of economic growth in India have unfortunately been subject to a fair degree of floxy, nausea, pilification." The word is, I spell it out to you, I can't pronounce it. English is not my mother tongue. FLOCCINAUCINIHILIPILIFICATION. It finds its place in the Oxford English Dictionary. And it says that notwithstanding this, the growth is likely to pick up. The Oxford English Dictionary says that the word is a rare one originating in the mid-18th century to describe the action of estimating something as worthless. So we have almost a 300-year history to it, 250, 300. On the other hand, the RBI governor has just responded on Monday by saying that, Mr. Shaktikant Das, a distinguished colleague, "I'm not saying that we maintain a Panglossian countenance and smile away every difficulty." Now, what is Panglossian? Again, Panglossian is defined in the Oxford Dictionary as a way of life which is characterized by one of extreme optimism. Comes out of the writings of Voltaire, the French philosopher in 1759, referring to a character in his play, Candida, on optimism. Now, these are arguments which come on both sides, but I think the fact of the matter is that this is a crisis that has to be addressed by the current generation. It may have been caused by our generation, but we have to attend to it along with the present generation. We cannot shy away from it. And both these crises call upon concerted government action. Governments across the world, which our declaration has tried to address. First and foremost, water and energy are economic commodities. They're not God-given in the current environment. They need to be measured. They need to be sold, priced. Unless you measure water and you put a price to it, nobody will give the value of water, never appreciate the value of water, will continue to waste it. Similarly, energy produced and energy distributed or consumed must be measured to the last. That is why a salient point in our declaration is on digitalization of all these figures, right from procurement, supply, and use to the last point, to give it an economic and measurable status. Unfortunately, in India, as I had mentioned, water being the essence of life is in the state list. It is neither in the central list nor in the concurrent list. And states follow their own policies and populism to drive policies and public passions. But again, at the root of it, water has to be measured. I remember as Principal Secretary of both power and water in my state, I had asked the Chief Minister that we must measure water supply. Canal water is not measured. Tube water is not measured. It must be measured to give it a price. He politely told me, Anilji, you will go away to Government of India, allow me to contest the elections. Now this is the politicization of water. Similarly, electricity, it has become an electoral tool in developing countries particularly. But if we want both these essentials of life to survive and continue as economic activities, we must look upon them as economic activities, bring policies which will conserve water, which will preserve water, laws which will punish the contamination or pollution of water bodies, water sources, the preservation of wetlands, the river plains, so that water can percolate down and doesn't run into the oceans. We have concretized most water sources to so-called conserve water. But in the process, water percolation to the groundwater has collapsed. We've reached levels of water extraction where it is not groundwater. It is getting contaminated by very harmful elements which are embedded in the earth. That has to be a danger signal. The time has come where every home must have an energy efficiency meter telling you how to use your energy at home efficiently. I think every water faucet must have a meter so that when you switch it on, you know how much water you are consuming and bring a sense of realization or guilt in all that. I keep listening to this argument that showers for bathing must be stopped. Yes, you put a meter and maybe somewhere we will get a consciousness of how much water we are consuming. These, I think, they require a behavioral shift in the way we have lived to a way that we need to live. Just as we need to adapt when we move from a village environment or a small-time environment to a city like New York or any other metro, there has to be a shift in your behavior, seeing the planetary emergencies that have come in our own lifetime. Thank you very much. To survive and continue as economic activities, we must look upon them as economic activities, bring policies which will conserve water, which will preserve water, laws which will punish the contamination or pollution of water bodies, water sources, the preservation of wetlands, the river plains, so that water can percolate down and doesn't run into the oceans. We have concretized most water sources to so-called conserve water. But in the process, water percolation to the groundwater has collapsed. We've reached levels of water extraction where it is not groundwater. It is getting contaminated by very harmful elements which are embedded in the earth. That has to be a danger signal. The time has come where every home must have an energy efficiency meter telling you how to use your energy at home efficiently. I think every water faucet must have a meter so that when you switch it on, you know how much water you are consuming and bring a sense of realization or guilt in all that. I keep listening to this argument that showers for bathing must be stopped. Yes, you put a meter and maybe somewhere we will get a consciousness of how much water we are consuming. These, I think, they require a behavioral shift in the way we have lived to a way that we need to live. Just as we need to adapt when we move from a village environment or a small-time environment to a city like New York or any other metro, there has to be a shift in your behavior, seeing the planetary emergencies that have come in our own lifetime. Thank you very much.